Good evening, patriots. Constitution Vet here, and welcome back to my channel. Tonight, we'll be diving into the United States Constitution. As I mentioned in the previous video I released yesterday, this is going to be a multi-part video mini-series of sorts. Together, we're going to be breaking this majestic compilation of documents down together. When I first started this channel, I created a pretty brief analysis on the Second Amendment. And while that was good, we need to understand the history behind the Bill of Rights, why it was created, and why it's so important to understand today. So sit back, relax. I got my coffee, got my Constitution. Let's get started. To paraphrase, the United States Constitution is the rule book on how our country should be managed and led. But more importantly, it's the governing regulation that states what rights you have as an American citizen. However, it wasn't always like that. In fact, right after we won our independence from England, we didn't have a fully formed constitution. We won our independence. Yay, we're independent, we're free. Okay, now what? What do we do now? How do we manage this new country called the United States of America? Let's not forget, this is a whole new thing. All of our founding fathers were branded as traitors. And if we lost that war, we would not be here right now. But we did. We won the war. And now we are tasked with creating this new government. How are we going to do that? Over time, this thing called the Articles of Confederation was drafted, and it was a precursor to the United States Constitution. It was fine, but it had a lot of problems. Tonight, we're going to look at the main debate after the Articles of Confederation, the split between two groups of our founding fathers. One half believed that we needed a strong federal centralized government. The other side argued, no. We need more power to each individual state and less power to the centralized federal government. This is known as the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. Now, how does this relate to the Bill of Rights? Well, to summarize, that debate culminated in a compromise of sorts. This compromise was the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. So that's the context, that's the foundation. Let's get into this together. During my Second Amendment analysis video, I showed a scene from the miniseries called John Adams. Tonight, I'll be showing another scene from that same TV show. What you're about to see is a verbal debate of sorts, a verbal exchange between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Now, these two guys were not big fans of one another. In fact, they had heated disagreements with each other all the time. Hamilton was a big advocate for strong centralized government, whereas Jefferson was highly against it. He felt that there should be more power to the states.
You must find Philadelphia much changed, Mr. Jefferson.
More change than I could have imagined, Mr. Hamilton. Not the city itself. All cities swallow everything in their weight.
That's no surprise to me. That's why I abhor them. But I've been, as you know, in revolutionary France, where the streets are filled with the songs of liberty and brotherhood and the overthrow of ancient tyrannies of Europe, and to return from there to this, our cradle of revolution, and find the dinner table chatter is all of money and banks and authority is an unwelcome surprise.
Unwelcome, perhaps, but necessary.
I must admit, Mr. Hamilton, I'm
A little uncertain as to the purpose of the Treasury Department. No doubt its function will reveal itself to me in good time.
The future prosperity of this nation rests chiefly in trade. Trade It depends, among other things, on the willingness of other nations to lend us money.
And how would you propose to establish international credit?
Our first step would be to incur a national debt. The greater the debt, the greater the credit. And to that end, I have recommended to the President that Congress adopt all the debts incurred by the individual states during the war through a national bank. The idea being that if the states owe Congress money, then other nations will feel more inclined to lend it to us.
If the states are indebted to a central authority, it increases the power of the central government.
You have it exactly. The greater the government's responsibility, the greater its authority.
The moneyed interest in this country is all in the north, so the wealth and power would inevitably be concentrated there in a federal government, to the expense of the South.
So I want to pause it here for a moment. If you can tell, there's a clear distinction between Hamilton and Jefferson. Hamilton is in favor of creating a national bank, incurring debt to create credit. Now, on one hand, that doesn't sound that bad. I mean, let's be honest. You're creating a new nation. You want the nation to be a nation to be respected. You want to have its own place on the global stage. You need to have some form of financial stability. However, there's one key thing that Hamilton said that Jefferson immediately was not a fan of.
It increases the power of the central government.
You have it exactly.
So right off the bat, Jefferson says, wait a second, this increases the power of the central government. Hamilton is like, exactly.
The greater the government's responsibility, the greater its authority.
The greater the government's responsibility, the greater its authority. Now, this really rubbed Jefferson the wrong way. Why is that? The reason why it kind of ticks off Jefferson. From his point of view, it's like, wait a second. We are the United States. The states should have some say in this. The states should maintain some sense of sovereignty in their own power. If we are entrusting everything to one central authority, well, there's some risk in that. The danger is that authority could become tyrannical. Now, notice how earlier Jefferson was saying that he visited France. And in this time, France was on the eve of revolution. Jefferson's biggest fear is that America, this new country, would become led by tyrants.
The moneyed interest in this country is all in the north, so the wealth and power would inevitably be concentrated there in a federal government, to the expense of the South.
If that is the case, it is unavoidable if the Union is to be preserved.
I fear our revolution will have been in vain if a Virginia farmer is to be held in hock to a New York stock jobber, who in turn is in hock to a London banker.
So as you can tell, Jefferson is clearly not a big fan of being indebted to foreign countries. Furthermore, he does not think it's fair to put a Southern farmer in debt to a wealthy Northern banker. Now, again, this topic is kind of complex because, as we talked about before, you do need to have some type of central governing authority to run a nation effectively. But now we're getting into the realm of, well, okay, what powers do the states have then? Do they have any powers? More importantly, what rights do they have? Another aspect of this show that I love so much is the people they chose to play these characters. I paused it right here for a reason. Not just to show the words, but also to show the actor they chose for Washington. That's right, this is kind of a side tangent. But the guy they found to play Washington, oh my gosh, it's spot on. The guys who made this show did their research, and they found a guy who looks like a spitting image of George Washington. Anyways, if y'all haven't seen this miniseries, I highly recommend it. It's HBO's John Adams. Okay, so now that we've established the clear distinction between Hamilton and Jefferson, Hamilton being the Federalist and Jefferson being the Anti-Federalist, let's try to break this down further. Whenever I cover this subject in my classes, I play this video here for my students. It's a short video And it may seem kind of cheesy, but it does a really good job at highlighting the clear distinctions between both parties. Additionally, this video also shows the transition from fierce debate to a compromise, which then results into the Bill of Rights.
It is I, George Washington, President of the Constitutional Convention. Our new nation, the United States of America, declared its independence from Britain on July 2nd, 1776, and earned its freedoms as the fruits of victory in the Revolutionary War. But then came the hard part. Once Britain was defeated, we were now tasked with ruling ourselves. Our first attempt of government was the Articles of Confederation, but it failed miserably. No army, no navy, no power to tax, no leader. The weaknesses go on and on. For 5 months during this year of 1787, from May to September, we have met in secret at Independence Hall, enduring the sweltering Philadelphia heat to create a new document altogether, the United States Constitution. And after much debate and compromise, our new government is ready to be unveiled to the American people for ratification by the 13 states. However, two groups have emerged with opposing views on this new government.
We are the Federalists, those of the Congress in favor of this new Constitution. We represent the urban city dwellers and are led by James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. Our best and brightest minds have thought long and hard to combine the best elements from the best governments of the past to create a unique government the world has never seen. We have written 85 essays called the Federalist Papers to explain our Constitution and encourage ratification.
Not so fast. Not all are in favor of this Constitution. We are the anti-Federalists. Members of the Congress who are against the Constitution. We represent the farmers and are led by Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, and Samuel Adams. The Constitution renders our federal government, or the central government, way too strong. The power should remain with us and the states. The limitation of government is the surest record of the happiness of the people.
So far, what we're seeing is, again, the Federalists believe that in order to maintain a strong nation, you need to have a strong central government. And of course, they mentioned that they're using examples from previous countries and previous governments in an effort to create a better one for this nation. However, on the opposing perspective, the anti-Federalists, made up of predominantly farmers, people who feel that, wait a second, we cannot let this centralized government become too strong, lest our individual rights and freedoms and liberties will become subject to their rule.
You have witnessed the failure of the Articles of Confederation, a failure that can be attributed to our government being too weak and possessing too little power. Only a strong federal government can fix the problems caused by the Articles. Only a strong federal government can get us out of the debt from the Revolutionary War. Nothing is more certain than the need for government.
To paraphrase that point, what he's saying is the Federalists believe that you need to have a single central power making important decisions.
Ha! How fast you Federalists forget. Long have we endured the powerful British government under the tyranny of King George. And after so recent a triumph over the British king, after blood has been spent, it is truly astonishing that a set of men among our Americans would champion a government that would destroy our liberties.
Now, on the other perspective here, one word stands out: liberties. That's a big component of the anti-Federalists. Their view is, even though you have one person in charge making decisions, one centralized government making the call, you still need to have some form of guarantee that the citizens' liberties will not be taken for granted.
You will bring back an all-powerful monarchy.
How short-sighted you anti-Federalists are. The safeguards we have placed in our Constitution, the checks and balances, the separation of powers, will never allow our government to grow to the injurious size of Britain.
Back onto the Federalist perspective. The fact that our Constitution already had three branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, that was enough for them to say, no, we're not going to become a monarchy. We're not going to become tyrants. We have these checks and balances, these three branches, to prevent that. So let's pause for a moment. Let's go to modern day. I'll pose this question for y'all to chew on. Even though there are checks and balances today, and even though there are three branches of government today, does tyranny exist in our centralized government? Secondly, are there states today regaining their sovereignty? Are there state governments discussing the ideas of secession? Think about those two questions as we go through the rest of this video.
We cannot listen to 13 separate voices or nothing will get done. Like it or not, the government must be more powerful than the states. The people must give to the government some of their natural rights in order to provide it with power.
We will not ratify this Constitution without a Bill of Rights or a list of the rights of all citizens, guaranteeing that they will never be violated by our government.
So as you can tell, this is kind of cheesy, but it does a really good job illustrating both perspectives. To sum up, Federalists equal big gov, big government, less power to the states. The anti-federalists are anti-big gov, and they want more power, more sovereignty to each individual state. How did we resolve this debate? How do we find common ground between these two fractured perspectives? The answer? The Bill of Rights. The compromise was including some list of God-given rights to all American citizens. What you're seeing before you is a scholarly article. This article is called Correcting the Constitution. I read this a while ago, and I still use it in my classes. It does a great job at clearly and concisely showing why the Bill of Rights was necessary and other perspectives on this compromise. For this video, I'm going to highlight this part right here. This focuses on four perspectives, four of our founding fathers, and how each of them had their own views. Hamilton felt that a Bill of Rights would allow its citizens to test the strength of the government. However, George Mason refused to sign the Constitution until some list of rights were included. Patrick Henry feared that a strong government would become tyrannical and take advantage of its citizens. James Madison, who was originally a Federalist, eventually became an anti-Federalist, realizing that you cannot have a country without its people, without the citizens in support of a country. Thus, after many, many long days of debating and arguing and legit all-out fighting, you came to the Bill of Rights, such as the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. Now notice how those are all in the First Amendment. Now that we have a clear understanding of the history behind the Bill of Rights and how it came to be, let's go into what the First Amendment actually says. The First Amendment is as follows. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It's a lot to take in. It's not as simple as the Second Amendment. However, I argue that the First Amendment is the most important amendment out of all of them. And here's why. The reason why this is so important is that it guarantees the citizens of a country the unalienable right to believe in what you want to believe, say what you want to say, go where you want to go, argue who you want to argue with, and most importantly, to tell the government how concerned you are about the government. Let's connect this to modern day now. The freedom of religion. If you want to believe in the flying spaghetti monster, guess what? You can. You're free to do so. You are an American citizen. If you want to be a Christian, go for it. If you want to worship Allah, if you want to be Jewish or be an atheist, guess what? You can. That's a beautiful thing about our country. You have the right to believe what you want to believe. Today, a big concern has erupted between the centralized government mandating certain things to happen to American citizens. Well, wait a second. If you are a devout Catholic, for example, you cannot follow certain things that have been mandated by the federal government. Why? Because it goes against your religion. If you believe in something, and if that is your religious view, according to this, the federal government has no legal authority to tell you to do something that violates your religious belief at all. The prohibiting of the free exercise thereof. Now, this goes into the thing that happened last year, where certain people were not allowed to go practice their faith. Now, to be fair, every leader of every religious place had their own right to say, should we open, should we be closed? Again, that's their call. Again, if you are a leader of a religious location, and if you want to lead your people, your flock, to worship whatever God you have, the federal government has no authority to tell you otherwise. They cannot stop you. You want a comparison? Look at Canada. Canada, these rights are being trampled upon. The freedom of speech is being trampled on. Now, this is a big one. To be completely honest with you, this one might require its own separate video. For this video, we'll keep it simple and concise. Freedom of speech. That's all it says. It does not prohibit certain types of speech. All it says is Congress shall make no law prohibiting the exercise of your freedom of speech. Now, like I said, we'll probably dissect that more in another video, okay? But that's what it says, black and white. Freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble. That does not mean riot. There's a big difference. Your right to protest is there. I may not agree with what you're protesting with, but that is your American right. It doesn't matter what group you're a part of. It doesn't matter where you are. If you want to protest, that's your American right. However, the right to riot is not there. There's a big difference. Notice how it says peaceably assemble. What does that mean? It means assemble peaceably. Okay, you see what I'm getting at? I'll let you connect the dots there. Recent scholars have argued that this also applies to your freedom to associate with people you know. If you want to peaceably assemble with your friends at Walmart, you can. If you want to peaceably assemble with your family on a holiday at home, you can. This is where it gets really interesting. For a state to tell its citizens that you cannot go to someone's home and celebrate, they can't do that. Because this clearly says you have the right to peaceably assemble. Again, we'll dig into that more in another video. And finally, the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Basically, what this means is if the government has ticked you off, you have every right to write to your representative, to write your senator, to write your leadership and say, hey, this is pissing me off. This needs to get fixed now. Let's go back to history for a second. When this was created, this was during a time of global revolution. This is just after America, which was a brand new country full of farmers, peasants, who just defeated the world's largest empire, For our founding fathers to include this is a big deal, because you are giving the right of your citizens to call you out, to say you're not leading us the way we want to be led, you're out. In closing, I want to leave y'all with this. No matter how dark the days get, no matter how disheartening or depressing things may be, know that these rights are not provided to you at the discretion of the government. These rights are not privileges at the behest of your government. These rights are given to you by your Creator, by your God. These are rights that cannot be taken away. Before we go, think about that. Really think about those two questions I asked you earlier. Even though our current government has 3 branches, is it becoming tyrannical? And do you think our states currently are regaining their sovereignty? Is there going to be another schism between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists? I'll let you decide that answer. Now, before you go, if you can, please make sure to like, subscribe, share this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, please continue supporting other videos that have inspired me to create this channel. I'll link their descriptions below. I'll provide other resources below in the description as well. With all that being said, have a great night. Never surrender, never submit. This is Constitution Vet, signing out.